Okay, in this example, we're going to work with interpreting a function and its inverse. So, for example 1, our function c of x equals 4/3 of x plus 1 is a function that represents the amount of cookies you can cook with x cups of sugar. That means the function c is telling us the amount of cookies I can cook with an amount x of sugar. So for every cup of sugar, function c tells us an amount of cookies. Because we know that an inverse function undoes what the original did, that means that the inverse function receives an amount of cookies, and in return, it tells us the cups of sugar needed to create those cookies. So how can we describe the inverse function? The inverse function tells us how many cups of sugar do we need to build certain amount of cookies. So, how many cups of sugar are needed to cook an amount of cookies. Another way to look at it is that given an amount of cookies, the function tells me how many cups of sugar do I need. And it's the same thing, just it depends on how you want to rewrite this sentence. So careful with sometimes maybe Alex tells you the sentence in one way, maybe on the other way, but you have to make sure that the implications are correct. That means that if you give it an amount of cookies, it will tell you how many cups of sugar do you need. So the other interpretation is given an amount of cookies, it tells me how many cups of sugar do I need. And that's interpretation for this example. Let's look at another example. Here I have a function t of x that is a function that describes the amount of money saved by Sandy given a month x. So this is a function. Given any value of x that represents a month, in return I obtain the money that Sandy has saved. So let's write this in function notation. So if I give it a month, a time in months, time, it gives me in return the money that Sandy has saved. So the inverse function is going to do the inverse thing. If I give it an amount of money, it will tell me how many months it took to save that money. So the description of the behavior of the inverse function is that, again, we can rewrite this in a lot of different ways, but we have to make sure that the implications are correct. That given an amount of money, it tells me the amount of months that it took to get that money. So, and a way to write this is given an amount of money saved, it tells me how many months it took. Another way to look at it is it gives the amount of months it took to save an amount of money. Same implication, different ways to write it. A third one. I have a function wt that is the value of a house for each year t that passes. So this function is a function that if you plug a time in years, in return it tells you the value of the house. So in the inverse function has to tell me the opposite. If I have the value of the house, it can tell me the time in years that took for the house to be worth that much. So the interpretation for this function can be written in different ways. The first way could be given an amount, given the value of a house, it tells me the time in years that it took to get that worth. Or in other words, it tells me, it gives the number of years or the time in years that took for the house to be a specific value. Or just for sake of simplicity, to be a value. So that is how we interpret inverse functions.